In this week's video, we're going to talk about what it's been like to use the Fujifilm X-T4, both personally and professionally, for around about a year, and how I feel it might be improved in the next model. Hi everyone, and welcome back to the channel, and welcome back to another Gear Short. This is Dylan Golby. Now, it's been a while since I uploaded a video, but over the past few weeks I've had quite a bit of work come in, which is great, but it has taken up a good portion of my time, and I haven't been able to find the time to make these videos. So hopefully from this week, as things start to slow down again, I'll be able to make a few more videos. Now, during that time I have picked up quite a few new pieces of gear, so we will be talking about a few of those in the coming weeks. One of those is the GF63 f2.8 for the GFX system. Another one is the Cam Ranger 2, which is a Wi-Fi tethering system that I've invested in, which now supports Fujifilm. So I'll be giving that a go over the next few weeks and giving my thoughts on that. A couple of companies have reached out over the past few weeks. One of those is Seven Artisans. They've sent me a 35mm f1.2, this tiny little guy for the X system, and I'm going to sort of get into this and see what it's like to use a lens that's roughly about 1/10 the cost of Fujifilm's offering. Another thing is the tour box. Now, I was quite excited when these guys reached out. I hadn't heard of this before, and I've been using the Loupedeck Plus with Capture One for a while, and it's not the best integration, and my Loupedeck Plus is getting a little bit long in the tooth. Some of the dials don't work, some of the buttons are a bit sticky now, so I was looking for a replacement. I was about to start looking for a replacement anyway, so when they offered to send this over, I thought, yeah, let's definitely give this a go. So I'm going to be using this with Capture One for the next few weeks, and I will let you guys know my findings, what I think of it, what its shortcomings might be. So if any of these are things that you're interested in, please do subscribe. But let's get on to today's topic. Okay, so the Fujifilm X-T4. I've been using it. I actually pre-ordered this camera. At the time, I wasn't looking to upgrade, especially I wasn't looking to upgrade to something that is pretty much essentially the same camera with IBIS and a new battery in it, but it was roughly the same price as the X-T3 at that point, and they were offering a couple of free batteries and a battery charger to go with this. So I thought, well, Fujifilm's going to be using this battery in the future anyway, so it might be a good time to get into the system where I can save a few $100s on batteries for future purchases. So that's why I jumped on the X-T4 and not the X-T3. Now, having said that, it does have a few ergonomic changes from the X-T3 that could be for better or for worse depending on how you feel about them. The first is that in order to accommodate the new battery, they've actually had to make a thicker grip here. In the beginning, it felt a little strange because the X-T1, X-T2, and X-T3 have pretty much, give or take, been exactly the same size, and the X-T4 is a little bit bigger, but that was something that I got used to. Another thing would be the stills and movie dial, which allows you to switch back and forth, and we'll talk about that in a moment. And the final thing would be this flippy, tilty screen that pops out from the side here, which I will talk about in a moment. This is something that almost stopped me from buying the camera. So rather than going through all of the different things that have changed on this camera, I thought I would focus on the ones that have made a really big change in the way that I've been working with the camera, and some that maybe haven't made such of a great change, and then a few that maybe I would like to see fixed or updated in upcoming cameras. So let's begin with something that I wasn't expecting to really like that actually became a huge part of the way that I shoot, and that is the IBIS. Now, I had the XH1 and I was enamored with it in the beginning, but over time I started to really dislike that giant grip. It didn't fit in any of the bags that I'd been using to carry my X-T2 and my X-T3, and so it just became a little bit outside of, a little bit too different from the bodies that I was used to using, and I really never got into it. Now, having said that, having IBIS in the X-T4, so basically an X-T3 body, has been huge. It's been something that has allowed me to not take a tripod at times. So when I might be going out on something like a bike ride in the afternoon, and maybe I would normally take a tripod to make sure I can shoot at low ISOs when the light starts to fade, I would normally have to take, a small tripod or even a larger tripod, but with this, I know that I can get down to, a half a second and still get sharp images. Now, when it comes to my my day-to-day professional work, that has been really, really useful in things like event photography. So Just recently, I photographed a couple of government and corporate dinners, and these are sort of round tables where people don't move a lot, and they sit down and they have, you know, fairly calm conversations. There's not a lot of, you know, moving around and going from person to person and things like that. So I'm able to shoot down to something like a 60th of a second at a candlelit dinner and still use low ISOs, so I'm not introducing a lot of noise into those images. That's also been really good for shooting the details at a corporate event or something like that. So if I need to make a photo of, say, you know, the sponsored drinks or the signage or things like that, I can do that at base ISO and know that I can just hand hold at, you know, a quarter or an eighth of a second and get a really clean file of those without having to break out a tripod or a flash or something like that and disturb the event. So that's been really good with IBIS. The other thing that came with the IBIS was the really quiet shutter. Now, it's significantly quieter than the X-T3, and so at things like the aforementioned dinners, where people are talking quite quietly amongst themselves, I can walk around the room and, you know, make a few photos without really being noticed. And I think for, say, wedding shooters or event shooters, that can be a real boon at times. So I wasn't expecting, again, to really appreciate that, but I do. As for the battery life, now, I never really had a problem with my X-T2s and my X-T3s. I was able to get through, you know, a full family session or, you know, a half-day corporate session on one battery. I don't really chimp a lot. I don't use the screens too much, so it wasn't really an issue for me. But having this battery, I have yet to exhaust it in any session that I've shot, whether it be full day corporate or just anything at all. A full wedding, single battery is enough to get me through. I'll change memory cards before I change the battery. So not really expecting to like that, but it has been a big help. The only thing with that is I still use an X-T3 and I still own an X-T2. I also have the X100V. So I am now juggling two sets of batteries, but I guess that will get better over time and I won't have to deal with that anymore. The next thing would be the stills and movie selector switch here. Now, with the X-T3, you could use this selector dial, the mode selector dial, to go all the way around to movie, and it would enable, you know, all the movie settings that you had. With this one, basically you switch it left or right, and it will disable all movie controls and only allow stills controls, or it will disable all stills controls and only allow movie controls. Now, if you're somebody who's doing something like an event, and you're run and gun shooting a whole lot of video, but then you need to grab a couple of quick stills, you could have all of your dials set to automatic so that you can just flick to stills and quickly shoot in aperture priority to get a very, very quick still, and then flick back to movie and continue shooting video. So for somebody like me, that comes into play when, you know, I'm a stills shooter primarily, that's what I do for work, but occasionally I will make these YouTube videos, and being able to switch around and know that, you know, my screens haven't changed brightness, my lights here haven't changed brightness, and I'm going to get exactly what I need out of the camera just by clicking that switch is, you know, it's just one small thing that allows me to get things done a little bit quicker. It's one less barrier to entry for creating these YouTube videos for me. So that's been really useful for me as well. So that's the good stuff. Now, the one change that really bugs me is this screen right here. And at first, it sort of became a bit of an issue because, you know, I shoot a lot of fast-paced family sessions, and being able to get low and high angles by just flipping the screen up or down very quickly was really, really useful on the X-T2 and the X-T3. Now, in order to do that, I need to flip it all the way out and turn it all the way around to get a low angle, or turn it even further to get a high angle. And this is just one thing that when I'm moving around and running and playing with kids and things, like, it's just it's asking to get broken. And the same thing happens with, say, you know, a busy event or a wedding, a room full of people. If you have to flip this out to get a low angle or a high angle rather than kneel down in the middle of a crowd, it's just asking to be broken off. It's a bit of a pain. The things that really make it a bit of a deal breaker are when you're trying to record audio or tether. So if you open this up to put a tether cable in here, you flip that out, you can no longer turn it. If you've got it turned to the direction you might like, and it happens to cover up the tether port, you no longer get that angle. Same thing goes for audio. Your audio plugs are up here, so once you've got those out, you can no longer move the screen. It just doesn't have as much flexibility in terms of usage on just quick day-to-day shooting as the regular screen. So when it comes to the X-T5, I would really like to see a return to that screen. This channel may become a very Nikon-oriented channel very quickly. If that doesn't happen, I think this is one thing that really, really bugs me. So having said that, the camera has come a long way. A lot of upgrades here. We've got better battery life. We've got more usability for hybrid shooters and things like that. We've got a slightly bigger grip, which I'm sure makes quite a few people happy. The one thing that I think really, really needs some improvement is the autofocus system. Now that made huge jumps from the X-T1 to the X-T2 to the X-T3, and then the X-T4, because it had the same sensor and processor, we were able to get those improvements back into the X-T3 as well. However, I still don't think it's quite come far enough. I feel like Fujifilm they're lagging behind a little bit, and they have quite a few jumps to make in order to catch up with or even get close to the competition. And so the AFS single point is fantastic. It's accurate, it's quick. Even with the older lenses now, we're able to focus on things very accurately, very quickly, even in low light. When it comes to the AFC performance, however, it's still overly complicated and not as accurate as it could be. So when I talk about overly complicated, I mean the fact that we have to go through the different custom AFC settings to basically predict what our subject might do. So I have to know in advance what my subject is going to do in order to set the AFC mode that will work best for that situation. I have to know if they're going to be rapidly accelerating or decelerating. I have to know if they're going to be hiding behind a tree. Those sorts of things, I think, in this day, when we're used to seeing AF systems of the quality that we see these days, that sort of thing needs to be better built into the algorithm. That shouldn't be something that we have to decide on the spot. We shouldn't have to memorize 6 different AFC settings to be able to get things in focus. The next thing with that is the big change that came to the X-T4. We now have that AF tracking, the wide area tracking, with a single point that you can put on your subject, and it is supposed to follow it very, very accurately. Now, coming from Nikon DSLRs, where we had the 3D tracking, it's a sort of a system that I'm kind of used to seeing, but I'm also used to seeing it work very, very well. With the Nikon DSLRs, you put it on, their little 3D algorithm decides, okay, yep, that is what you're focusing on, that's what you want to focus on. It remembers that and tracks it with color and contrast and all those sorts of things, and it does an excellent job at it. This tends to lose subjects extremely quickly in that mode, and no matter how many times I've tried to use it, I've ended up reverting to simply using the AF zone mode, where you have a little square with 9 focus points inside, and I just use that. I know roughly what my composition is going to be. I know where my subject is going to be. That's been the best solution for me when using the Fujifilm cameras. The other thing I would like to see improvements in is the face detection algorithm. Now, it's become a lot more accurate over the years. As long as the scene is very simple and there's only one person in there, it works quite well. However, if you have anything else in the frame, be that a tree, a car, the person's knee, for example, it will randomly just say, that looks like a human face, rather than the glaringly obviously human face that's in the frame. So I see a way to improve that I think would work really well with the way that I've chosen to use the AFC system in here, and that is by using that little zone and saying, okay, well, only find faces in this zone. So if I put that group of 9 squares in the area where I want a person to be tracked or person to be found, it won't try and look around the rest of the frame to try and find faces. Now, that would be really useful when you're, say, doing a group shot. Maybe I have my family walking along and I have a child running out in front of the family. I don't want it to find mum's face, I want it to find the child's face. So I put that little square on the child, and rather than just randomly moving focus points around on it, it's now tracking eyes and faces in that area, so it will find the child. But it won't, halfway through my shot here, jump off and find mum or dad or big sister or little sister or somebody like that. It will stay on the person that I have in that frame. Now, that would also stop it from, if you're shooting in a busy forest scene, it would stop it from finding faces in the trees. Of course, that won't work for every situation, but for my situations, that would work really well and help me to get a lot more in-focus photos. One more thing that I feel could really be improved in this camera, the X-T3, the X-T4 are cameras that shoot extremely fast. Now, I think with this one we can shoot 14 or 15 frames a second in mechanical shutter. In the electronic shutter mode you can shoot even more. And when you're banging off RAW files that quickly, for example, at one of my family sessions I might have 3 children and I want to try and capture each one of their reactions. So I might do a family portrait, and then I might jump in and grab, you know, a shot of child number 1, a shot of child number 2, a shot of child number 3, all the while trying to make them smile and laugh. And I might be firing off 5 or 6 frames really, really quickly to make sure I get the right expression from everybody in the frame. By the time I've done that with 2 or 3 people and then the whole family, or maybe we're doing a little bit of walking, the buffer runs out so quickly. So I would love to have a much deeper buffer on this 2 or 3 times so we can shoot, you know, 100 raw files in a row. I'm sure that, you know, sports shooters or wildlife shooters have probably run into this as well, but you can shoot really quickly now. But even with the 300 megabytes per second cards that I've got in here, I cannot empty that buffer fast enough in certain really fast moving situations. The final thing that I might like to see, and I'm not sure whether that's even possible with an APS-C size sensor, but I would love to see just one extra stop in clean ISO performance out of these cameras. If I could go from 1600 to 3200 and not have to worry about the ISO, that would be such a big benefit for the sorts of shoots that I do. So I'm not a sensor manufacturer, I'm not a designer or anything like that. I don't even know if that's possible, but that is something that I would really like. So there you have it. Those are the sort of positives and negatives that I've found going from the X-T3 to the X-T4 over the past year. Things that I really loved. The battery, the IBIS, the really quiet shutter, the ergonomic changes of being able to go from stills to movies. The things that I didn't really care for. The updated autofocus system wasn't really a great change in my opinion, at least for the way that I shoot. And the one thing that I absolutely despised and would love to see changed is this screen. I cannot say this often enough. This thing is an absolute pain for fast-moving shooting, tethering, and audio. Now, might be great if you're filming yourself as a vlogger, or maybe if you're on a gimbal and you need the screen out to the side. Sure, might be great. But for the style of shooting that I do, I would prefer that screen to be left for the XH2, and on the X-T5 to get the screen from the X-T1, the X-T2, and the X-T3 back on these cameras. So I hope that you guys have enjoyed that. These are just my opinions based on the things that I shoot, and I'm sure with such a complicated camera there's going to be a lot of people with a lot of different opinions. So I'd love to hear a little bit about that in the comments. What did you feel about some of the upgrades? Do you own this guy? Would you own it? What would you hope for the X-T5? So let's discuss that in the comments. Let's keep it civil. Nobody's right or wrong. We're just going to be talking about this camera and what we like about it and what we don't. So thanks again for watching. If you haven't already, please like and subscribe, and we'll see you in the next one.